Welcome to Electrify, the video show and podcast for electricians only, with your hosts Paul Abernathy and Jay the Basement King Grunberg. Sit back and enjoy the show. What up, everybody? Welcome to the stream. My name is Paul Abernathy, and tonight's a special treat because in tonight's show, I'm going to be looking at a series of videos on residential and giving my critique and giving some insight as it comes up. But you may or may not have seen these videos before, so we're going to be doing that, and I'm going to be sharing that tonight in this series. So I want to make sure that you all can follow along and make sure that, oops, let me change my video quality. Sorry about that. And so you all can follow along and listen as I give additional commentary. Now, typically, these are going to be done with me and Jay, but I am doing some stream testing. So I figured I would go on and do the initial review and kind of give you an idea of some of the new shows that we've got coming. And this is where we're going to scour the internet and we're going to find applications where we can stream it and we can comment on it and teach you some stuff along the way. Okay. And a lot of these videos will be some really good information. Some of it will be stuff that will tell you, it's probably not correct, but it's all live. So we will pause it, look it up if necessary, give our commentary on it, and just kind of roll with it. I will warn you up front that some of these videos probably have language in it that is offensive to some people. Again, don't hold me responsible for that. It is what it is. So just keep that in mind. So we're all big boys and big girls, so we understand those rules. But it ought to be an interesting episode for you tonight. And again, there's going to be a lot more content like this, other shows on other things. So again, there's a tips and tricks show that we've got working on, things like that. We're not do-it-yourselfers, so we're not going to do it-yourselfer shows, but we're going to give you a lot of content. Again, the network wants to bring you a bunch of stuff. So, without further ado, let's go on and get into tonight's lesson and review. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to be looking at the first stage of a residential layout, the planning and the layout. And this gentleman is doing some videos, and that's great. I'm a big supporter of people doing videos. So we're going to kind of take a ride through this journey with him and give advice where we need it. And, you know, if you're out there and you're new into the industry and you want to learn some of the different aspects, videos are a great way to do it. But I found that being able to give some commentary to the videos allows us to be able to explain things, add context to it and everything. So it should be a great journey. You might have heard me do something similar to this. It was electrical blunders. So this series by no means is about electrical blunders, although we will call out things that are accurate or inaccurate and add other insight to it. So buckle up and we'll get started in it and see what we got going on. First of all, I got to make sure I don't have multiple chat boxes coming up. So that's new for me to have all that. So, all right, let's go on and get into it. And we'll go on and get into the video. And I will, again, pause it and add my commentary where necessary.
All right, showing two switches at the door. And you can leave little notes and everything. This has got the foyer, times 2 lights, and 2 coats. 2 times coat. We also got, I don't know, I'm fucking nervous as shit. Alright, so this is a hallway. So you're gonna have a receptacle for every 11 foot. It's showing the time right here. And it's the long one, so I'm going to add another receptacle. showing 2 switches for a bay of light. And you want to keep
Sorry about that. I forgot to turn it off because I didn't want to interrupt him. So yes, I know I was muted, but just keep watching.
I don't want to put it here because I don't want to add a block. You need to have 3 blocks in a door or 2 blocks in a corner. Marking it out more. But you need a receptacle within 6 foot of the door. And I can see on the plans that TV is actually going right here. We'll have TV right here. And then you have to have a receptacle every 12 foot within the other receptacle. So 6 foot within the door and 12 foot within each other in a room.
So I like that. It is true. So all those rules for those that are following along and have your code book or looking at those things, the receptacle spacing is 210.52a. And then you got A1, and it talks about spacing. So 6 feet from a break in the floor line, like a doorway. Then you can go up to a maximum of 12 feet. Because at any point along that wall, you can't be more than 6 feet from a receptacle. So logically, if I go 12 feet from the receptacle, if I put something right dab in the middle of that 12 feet, then obviously it's within 6 feet of a receptacle, whether I go to the left or to the right. So totally accurate in how he's depicting that, most certainly.
So I'm going to try to play this off and make it as easy as possible for me. So that one right here. That one right here. Because I'm assuming that the bed's going to go right there because the window's in here and this is what's going on. So we can measure this out. This is a doorway too. That's 4 foot. So I can put one here and not add one right there because it's still within 6 foot of that door. Now this area is a little big. Coming into the door, I need one within 6 foot. And then same thing within this door. I need one within 6 foot. The distance a little far. So I have to have 2 right here. They look close and they look stupid, but
okay, I will add something here. If it happened to be that the receptacle within 6 feet of the doorway entry and within the break in the closet like he showed, if that's within 6 feet, you could get away with one receptacle if the receptacle is within 6 feet of the doorway coming in, but it's also within 6 feet of the break for like that closet you see on the right. If that receptacle is in that space, then obviously that it would be within 6 feet. So basically it's from you have to have a receptacle within 6 feet of the entry into the room. So you place that receptacle. Now, you also have to have a receptacle within 6 feet of the edge of that closet door. If it just so happens that a receptacle that you place there meets both those spacing requirements, then you would only need one. Now, I like his idea, more the better. So he's going to put 2 receptacles in for that. Again, he's probably doing a spec house, and so all of this has probably been laid out on the blueprints, but just keep in mind that's probably what he's doing as far as his layout goes.
all right, we got a hall right here. So I'm going to add a receptacle. And it's also showing a switch for the light. And then here's the bathroom. We only have 2 studs in this doorway, so we're gonna put a switch. So we're on an S for every switch that we need, so we know what size box we need. So there's only 2 studs here. We gotta account for the trim on the door. So we got a block times 1. And what that's gonna do is gonna move the box over just a little bit and keeps it away from the trim. I need a receptacle right here up high.
So a lot of people ask about, and again, if you're new to the trade, you might not know it. When we have a stud and maybe has 1 stud and you're at a doorway, chances are you're going to have a trim mold or something like that. So you got to be careful when you put that box in. So sometimes you got to do what's called a scab, or actually put a block of wood and scab it out so that when you put the box in, the cover has room. Now, again, you're a seasoned electrician, you know this. But a lot of times if you're new and you're getting into this, it can screw you if you put that box up there for the switch next to that stud at an opening, and then they come and put a trim mold and you find out that it covers part of your box. Happens a lot to people that are just getting into it and they don't think about those things. Also, when you're doing more upscale homes that maybe have larger trim around their doors or maybe larger moldings, be very careful, because there has been some upscale homes that have had really big trim, and one blocking might not be enough. So you'd have to have more than one blocking in order to get you out far enough. So when they do sheetrock it and you put that cover on that box for that switch, it's not going to be inhibited by the molding. So that's some things to think about. You make sure that you know what's going, make sure you know the type of doors that are going, the type of frames, and know what your trim is going to be. If it's typical standard trim, then one block or so or 2 blocks out might be adequate. But you're only going to know that by looking at your drawings or talking to the builder or the owners, the general contractor, all those type of things to help you understand what you need to space it out around these doors. So always make sure you don't want to come back and be screwed by the fact that you didn't scab it out far enough. That would suck. So we don't want that to happen, most certainly.
Because they're going to put a sink, and it's just one sink in this bathroom, but there's only one in the corner, so we got to add a block. We need 2 in the corner, just because the plate won't fit, and you don't want it buttoned up too tight in the corner. Right,
100% correct.
Bedroom, a hall, and the bath. We also have this foyer hall marked out. Now, in some places, if the wall space is more than 2 foot, they want us to add a receptacle. But in my area, all we need is 1 for 11 feet. All right.
Okay, let me comment on that real quick. So a lot of times when people say in my area, the code is the code. So typically any wall space that's 2 feet or more is going to require a receptacle. Okay. So you would have jurisdictions say, well, you don't need one here. My advice to you, again, your jurisdiction being different, if you follow the code and you follow the requirements of 210.52a, it's going to end up telling you that wall space. And if it's 2 feet or more, then you're going to have a receptacle. You count that wall space. If somebody says you don't need one, it's 2 feet or 2.5 feet or whatever, the code says you do. Okay. Now, if it is less than 2 feet, guess what? Doesn't require one. Some of you might put one in anyway. And as again, that's just an extra receptacle, but doesn't necessarily make it required. Okay. So remember those little things in the code that can help you. I mean, if you're building a spec home, then chances are you're speccing it out based on what the drawing says. Now he's got a set of drawings. So he's either worked this out with somebody, or the owner has given it to him, or he's walked around. And I think in a future episode, me and Jay, he will do that on a job site and show you how you would walk around with an owner and request the right information. The last thing you want to do is have something screw you at the end because you didn't discuss it. So again, we'll probably have an episode of that in the future that we can refer to.
We have a flex room here that's showing that I have switches right here. They're going to have these bay doors open. And I have to stay true to the plans because we work with production company. Means that we get paid for whatever's on this paper and nothing no more. A lot of times they'll draw on receptacles, but I don't follow that. I just follow the rules of the 6 foot in the door and the 12 foot in the room. And we have to play off where the TVs and the phones go, just so we have power next to them. So it's showing. And we got 2 studs again, so we want to block times 1. All right.
So important to know if you got to add a block or not. You don't want to be screwed on a trim, trust me.
So what I want to do is I can see that this is 6 foot, or less than 6 foot. So I'll put my TV here. And I'm going to start playing off my measurements from this. So right here, this is what I like to do. I like to measure my feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We know that's good. I don't like drilling under windows, so I like to kind of play my receptacles off so I don't have to do more work than I already have to do. So,
okay, context for those out there, I am sure his feet aren't 12 inches long, right? So he's doing an assumption on a step out, which is perfectly fine. He knows, but once he got to about 8, 9, 10, he realized I'm putting one here anyway, so I don't have to try to measure all the way out to 12 inches. For in his case, he doesn't like to put them under the windows. So that little space to the left of the window, that's where he wanted to be. And so it fell within the 12 feet, then he was okay. And that's kind of how you lay it out. Everybody's different in how they lay out a room. And you'll get used to not putting receptacles all stuck in a corner. I don't have a problem with putting one under a window because, again, as long as the layout's right, then a cord on an appliance or something, a lamp, should be able to reach the receptacle anyway. But that's just the way he does it, and that's perfectly fine. So far, so good. Everything looks great.
Being that, I'm going to go ahead and put one on the other side of the window. I know I can put one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That one right there. We'll get to the garage last because that's where a lot of stuff goes. Alright, so we got a hall. They want me to put a switch. They want me to put a switch here. But it's kind of small. So I'm going to do a switch for it's a 3-way. And then I'll block time. Alright. So in the receptacle right here, the hallway is less than 11 foot. So all we need is the one. I'm going to put.
Okay, so one of the things that I tell people that are new into this is he's doing a lot of writing on the studs. Perfectly fine. I want you to throw your layout on the studs, put your lines and marks, and we'll show that. Me and Jay will show that in upcoming videos. But you know, if you have 3 ways, S3, S4, S for single pole, things like that, receptacles, you do the receptacle symbol. If you're putting receptacles, although if they're down 16, 18 inches, we know what they are. Unless it's a switched receptacle, and you might make a mark on that. But other than that, I like how he marks things out on the floor. Now, I always tell you, always have your code book handy, especially when you're doing a review like this. So when I go into let's see here, 210.52, and again, for me, this is these are some really bad tabs. They're not my tabs, but most people know I stopped making my tabs. So one of the things to keep in mind is, sorry about that, is to always have your code book so you can follow along. So he's talking about hallways, the length of hallways. So for example, 210.52H says in dwelling units, hallways of 10 feet or more in length shall have at least one receptacle outlet. Now, in his case, if it was an 11-foot long hallway, he only needs one. If it was a 20-foot long hallway, still only need one. Okay. If it is less than 10 feet, you don't need any in the hallway. Okay. So again, 210.52H depicts that. Always have your code book handy so you can verify, and that way you can kind of get on. But he seems to be on the mark. He's 11 foot, so he's going to be adding a receptacle because he is 10 feet.
Nothing goes in here. It's just a linen closet or whatever. And here's the other side. That's just all right, in this bedroom. So 2 switches for lights, and then we want to block times 1 because we want 2 studs, and it's also showing a receptacle and a TV. Now, I want both of my stuff to go right here in the middle of this wall, the receptacle and the TV, but I can't put the boxes side by side with 1 stud. So I have to add a block in between these. So I'm just going to block times 1, and then I'm going to keep it far enough so the plates don't bump in the trim out. Okay. Right here, I'm just guessing that there's a bed here, so I'm going to put a receptacle on each side of the bed. And then I'm going to measure out. After a while of doing this, you can start to see what 12 foot is, 6 foot. Now I have to measure. Just try to stay tight, try to keep it less than what it's supposed to be. And then obviously when you open this door.
That's a Chromebook with the everything button, so you can find things instantly. From files to apps Even answers
Unfortunately,
online.
we
Who
have to
says
pay
you
the
can't have
bills for
everything?
folks, and
With
this
the
individual
Everything
is no
button.
different.
Switch to
So
finding
we're going to
things
run this
instantly.
commercial.
Switch to
Can't skip
Chromebook.
it.
For my wallet, I just wanted 3 things. Had to be simple, really easy to access your cards, and last forever.
But you want to make sure that it's within 12 foot of here, or you're going to start adding receptacles. You're going to do more work than you already do.
Got to give him a little ad revenue, right? After all, we are using this video.
All right, we're in the kitchen. And it's showing me that I have 3 switches going here. So 1, 2, 3. And if it helps you whenever you're boxing up or running wire and everything, it's easier just to write what's going over here. So we got the foyer 3. We got the kitchen. And we have 3 pins.
So again, he likes to write things out. Some people write it on the front of the stud. Some people write on the side of the stud. But again, writing things out, when you start pulling your cables, it just makes it so much easier to remember where things are going, keep it fresh in your mind, especially if you got helpers. If you got helpers, things like that, who are going to be pulling cable behind you, and you're drilling the holes, and you kind of know the way you want to drill. And if you get a real seasoned helper or an apprentice, they will almost know how to pull the cables by the routing of your bored holes, and they will learn to do that. Okay, so again, if you work as a team, then you start to hammer it out. You're a seasoned residential electrician. You've probably honed these skills down with your helpers or with your apprentices to where you're just second nature to you. I am sure that's the case.
Sometimes it's 2 pendants, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. It's easier just to write it out there so whenever you're on.
What's up, Marcus? Thanks for joining.
All right, in this situation, they've already got the cabinet layout on the ground. In the kitchen, it's a little different. We have to put these receptacles up high because there's going to be a counter spot. And we have, and we just want to make sure that we have it above the counter. Measurements, we'll go through that on another video or something. But basically, when it comes to kitchen cabinets, you want to stay 2 foot away from the edge. You have to have a receptacle within 2 foot of the edge of the cabinet. So I can see that this whole thing right here is 36 inches. It's 3 foot, so we can.
So one little thought here is, remember, we're doing counter spacing. We're following the counter spacing rules in 210.52, and we're getting into C, and we're doing measurements and all. 2 feet from the end. If there's a sink, 2 feet from the edge of the sink. If there's a break in the counter, like a range, then it's 2 feet from the edge of the break in the counter to the left. Have to have receptacle within 2 feet. The maximum distance between receptacles serving a countertop is 4 feet. So that confuses a lot of people, even in our Fast Tracks program, because they say, well, I thought it said 2 feet. No, you can't be more than 2 feet from a receptacle. But if your spacing is 4 feet apart, then at the center of that 4 foot spacing, you are within 2 feet of receptacle. So whether they put an appliance to the left or to the right of center, you're still going to be within 2 feet of a receptacle. So you're meeting the rules. So when we say the 2 foot, 4 foot rule, or we say the 6 foot, 12 foot rule, we're just giving you a rule of thumb in a sense that the 12 foot is the maximum spacing between receptacles that are serving just the regular room receptacles. When it comes to the countertop, the maximum distance between receptacles are 4 feet, because any point along the wall line, you have to be within 2 feet of a receptacle. But just remember, you got to have a receptacle within 2 feet of the edge of the counter. You have to have a receptacle within 2 feet of any break in that counter, like a range or anything like that, or a sink that breaks the counter. And also, you remember that while you can go up to maximum 4 feet between these receptacles, you might have a counter space that's maybe only 2 feet wide before you get to lay a sink or a break in the counter, like a range or something. It still would be okay to only have one there, because it's obviously within 2 feet of the end, and it's obviously within 2 feet of the break in the countertop. So just things you got to think about. The next thing is, in his case, they had the cabinet person laid it out on the floor. That makes it so much easier. I don't know how many people have been screwed in the past by an application where the counter wasn't laid out. And you end up going and you put something there and it shifts and it ends up being at the break in the counter where the range might be instead of over the counter, and you end up being screwed. So take a little time looking at your cabinet layout. If you don't have a cabinet layout, try to get one from the actual general contractor or somebody else, because let's just say worst case scenario is you get it from somebody and you laid out based on a drawing. Then if somebody screws you or the cabinet maker screws you or somebody screws you in the end, at least you have a drawing that you can say, look, I put this in, okay? I put this in based on the way the code is written and the way your drawing is. And that way, if they come back and say, oh, no, that's not what we agreed to, you can say, okay, well, you want me to move it, I'm going to have to issue a change order because I installed it where it said based on the cabinet layout. Now, if you don't have a cabinet layout and you're laying your counters in your kitchen, you need to get with the general contractor, bring them over there, whoever's responsible for this cabinet layout. Because when you put these things in and they're not spaced right or they're not where they need to be for code, you don't want to have to come back and try to shift this later when you're screwed, okay? So again, teamwork. Make sure you work that out with general contractor, the cabinet people, whoever. Now, I have been on a lot of residential jobs. I have never had an issue where I can't ultimately get somebody to give me something that shows me the layout of the cabinets and the countertops and everything. So you just got to go searching for it. It might be in another set of drawings for the builder, but you got to search for it. Don't guess. It'll come back to screw you in the end. Val asks, do you buy a new code book every year? Code books come out every 3 years, unless you're like Jay, who just beat the crap out of his code book. I do not buy one every year. I buy one when the code cycle comes out and it stays in pretty decent shape. Every 3 years, a new cycle comes out, I buy a new code book. Now, of course, most people know I have the electronic versions, so they're always on my phone. Okay, look at the Basement King. I knew he would come. He buys 2 of them every year because Jay just beats the crap out of his stuff. So anyway, let's get back to the video.
You can get away with one receptacle in the middle, but it has to be within 2 foot of the edge of this range and within 2 foot of this right here. So each set done, we'll just have one on this side because that's
See, so he's using the example I gave. His space was only 2 feet between the break and the countertop, let's say for a range or sink or whatever. So he can get away with having one receptacle. It's serving within 2 feet of the sink and 2 feet of the edge of the countertop. So he gets away with one. If you want to put more in, go for it. But in his case, as you heard earlier, he's doing this based on a spec house. So again, he's optimizing the money. He's optimizing what they agreed to, and he's not going to give anything extra. Okay. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. People say, well, I just throw in another one. Well, you can if you want, but again, he's being very frugal, and the company that he works for probably keeps an eye on that. So we're just not giving away things. You got to remember, it's extra wire, it's extra box, it's extra device. And so again, can't knock him for that application. You know, it's pretty common to do that, especially in a spec home.
That's more in the middle. All right, with the range, we have a microwave, and that's going to be at 82 inches. And then we have another one right here. This is a gas house, so we're going to add a receptacle down low off the microwave. It's just going to be for a pilot light or for a pilot for the range.
Okay, with that, be very careful. I will say that, you know what? You can have a pilot light for range, so assuming it's gas in this case, that can actually be off of the small appliance branch circuit. But just remember, that microwave cannot be off of the small appliance branch circuit. Also, if you are adding the microwave circuit, be careful of what the load is. Because if it's a individual dedicated circuit for the microwave, then you might have issues with adding other loads to it, that you might have a problem with your AHJ with that. Typically, a lot of the manuals for the microwave, they want a dedicated individual brand circuit. That means that it only serves that microwave. So make sure you look at the instructions that come with the manufacturer for what they want for. They might want a dedicated 20 amp branch circuit. Well, then it is dedicated only to that microwave. Now, a solution for this, if somebody gave him a problem, the solution would be, since that is ignition only, that he could have come off of the small appliance branch circuit. Yes, he could go down and feed that ignition source receptacle, and that's all it's for. The other allowance, for example, would be a clock outlet, and we don't ever see those anymore, but you can supply the ignition for like a gas range from your small appliance branch circuit. So just be careful with your application and how you would do it. But other than that, maybe they're accustomed to that in his area, and that's not an issue. So we'll assume that it's okay in his area.
Doesn't take much power, it's just whatever. All right, so we have another cabinet here, and it's 36 inches. And the edge of the counter on this way, I have to have one within 2 foot, just like we talked about. So it looks like it's pushing, it's getting kind of close. I know I got 2 foot this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the receptacle on this side, and I'm going to block it times 1 just to be safe and stay in the cabinet. All right, looks like we got a pantry here. And we're calling for a light in there.
Now remember, on that side that he's talking about, that wall space, he's talking about blocking it and putting 1 to move it over. So he's trying to optimize the spacing. So obviously that space, if that space is only 24 inches, you know, he's trying to optimize so that his receptacle is going to be within 2 feet of the edge of, let's say, the range or sink or whatever the break was in his counter. But it also has to be within 2 feet of the end of the actual counter as well. So he's moved his receptacle to be able to optimize for that because, again, he's only putting in the bare minimums. You can obviously put more than that. He's doing the bare minimums in here to meet his specs that are on his design for whoever he works for. So just keep that in mind.
So I'm going to put my switch on this side just where it shows on the plan. I'm going to block it times 1 because it's on the corner. Coming out, we have a refrigerator. Refrigerators usually measure about 39. They got a drum on the floor. So as long as it's within this, I can put on this, or this, it doesn't matter. I'll put it in the middle. So it looks good. We have another countertop that's 36 inches. We want to stay within 2 foot of the edge of this side and within 2 foot of this side. Looking good. So I'm going to put it on this side right here. So it stays right there in the middle. All right, coming out, we have a little dining area. They show you where the end of the cabinet is. I want to stay away from this wire. So I'm just going to put it on this side. And that's going to be for the dining. All right, same thing.
Now we'll add something here for those that are maybe not familiar with residential. Is he's moved away now from the countertop. So now he's moving into the area, might be the pantry, might be in the overall kitchen area where you have regular wall space rather than the countertop space. All of that is still going to be on the small appliance branch circuits. Again, you got to read the code, but the code demands that all the receptacles that are in that area be supplied by the small appliance branch circuit in the kitchen. So he's dropping now probably the receptacles down to normal 16 or 18 inches, but they're going to be supplied from the small appliance branch circuit. They're just not serving the countertop. They're now the wall space requirement receptacles. And remember, in the code, the countertop cannot serve a wall space requirement. It's only for the countertop. So now once he's off the countertop, he has to start his normal spacing in order to go around the wall that are not serving the countertop. Right? So that's what he's doing now. He's just adding those additional receptacles in his layout around the room. Now this is right off of the kitchen. So it sounds like to me, that's what he's doing. What's so funny, Val? All right, let me go back to it.
Say 6 foot where the dining room starts. I'm going to assume that.
So see, it's a dining room, which is supplied by the small appliance.
One right here. One right here. So. All right, we got a little island. So we need a receptacle down low, back. And then
this is a great time for me to talk about islands real quick. So if you look at his island, that's a fabricated island, right? So that's got a wall that's framed up, right? Okay, framed up. So people ask me all the time, remember where he just came from? That's the dining room, right? So people ask, is that wall space, that island? And the answer to that is absolutely it's wall space because that's a framed up wall. Even though it's going to have a counter on it and everything like that, That is wall space. Now, some people ask, well, what if I just had cabinets sitting there? And you can get islands that are just sitting on top of cabinets. That isn't wall space. That's a cabinet, right? So that's real important for folks out there. Sometimes they don't understand that. So when you get the wall space rules, if that wall space is like shown there, it is framed up, studded up, then that is wall space. And it has to meet any wall space. It's 2 feet or greater, has to have receptacles. That is facing the dining room, okay? So it will be on the small appliance brand circuit. Now, the rules are that you have to have at least 2 small appliance brand circuits. Can you have more than that? Absolutely, if you want. Just make sure, I will give you a tip. If you're doing a load calculation and you got more than 2, they're 1500 VA a piece, make sure you add 1500 VA for every small appliance branch circuit that you add. Don't think you get to add unlimited. Nope, you got to count for them. Just thought I'd let you know that. So if this individual right here didn't have anything there and they told him it was an island, and the island was actually cabinets that a counter is going to sit onto it, then I would not consider that wall space because that is not a wall. That's a cabinet. Okay, now check with your jurisdiction, but using that rationale, that, as you see right there, that is an island that is framed up as a wall space. Okay, just little things that I'll mention. Again, every jurisdiction can look at things differently, but what I'm doing is giving you ammunition so that you know how to tackle these things using videos like this. So hopefully you're enjoying the video and my commentary. All right, let's go on and get back to him.
Receptacles right here, we have to keep them a little high because they have to be within 1 foot of the countertop. So this right now, I'm about 8 inches, and I'll put my box about 8 inches down.
So remember something. What he's doing is, since this looks like this is going to be a flat across the countertop, the spacing rules in the National Electrical Code, if you got your code book and you go look at it, and you're going to look at 210.52, and we're talking about the spacing across the countertop. So what he's doing is he's using the allowance in 210.52, and it looks like I'm going to make sure I'm C3, and you'll see the example here where it's flat across the entire surface. So he's allowed to put a receptacle on the side as long as it's not under an overhang that is more than 6 inches beyond the support base. So in this case, this one's easy because in this case, the support base is all the way down there at the bottom where the studs are connected to the floor. It can be wacky when you're dealing with cabinets. So that's why it's important to know whether or not you have the requirement or not. Now, if you just put a receptacle in a cabinet because you want to serve the island, okay, that's fine. But you got to make sure that you don't put that receptacle under an overhang that's more than 6 inches from the base. Now, remember, the 2 rules that I'm just talking about are totally different. We had to determine whether or not the island was actually wall space, and that was for wall space receptacles, and this one is. We've now shifted to the receptacle that's required to serve the island. That's the one that he's installing right here to serve the island, and it can't be further down than 12 inches. I like that he's only going 8. That way he doesn't have to worry about anything. But also remember that the overhang cannot be more than 6 inches beyond the supporting base or the bottom of that wall. So just keep that in mind. So 2 different things we're looking at. We're looking at whether or not the portion that's facing the dining room is considered wall space. In this case, it is. And we're looking at whether or not the receptacles that are serving the island can be located on it, and it can't be over an overhang that's more than 6 inches beyond the base. Now, the receptacles that are in the front that serves the wall space for the dining room, they would probably more than not be anything that can serve the countertop rule. Why? Because it looks like they'll be underneath the counter more than 6 inches. So they do serve the wall space, but they're not serving the countertop space. That's why he's adding this one on the side. Okay? At least I hope that's what he's doing. All right, let's get on to it.
All right, and here I can see where the dishwasher is. You just put one down low, sideways. Put it over that. And then we need another one for the disposal. So I'm going to add a receptacle here, and I'm going to end up leaving a whip out.
Another way you can usually tell on an island is, for example, this one, you know it's wall space because it's got plumbing in it. You typically would not have the cabinet style islands. They're not going to have anything in it like plumbing. Okay, not to say never, but typically those are just cabinets that are put in place and you're bringing the wire up to them. So it's just cabinet space. In this case, obviously it's plumbed up for plumbing, so it is a wall. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind, especially if it's 2 feet or more. In this case, the part that's facing the dining room, that is very much wall space. Even though the counter might go over it, still wall space. Okay, so keep that in mind.
All right, same thing on this side. Just put the 8 inches down from the countertop because I want to keep it within that foot. Right here, I want to put a receptacle. This is kind of a long wall, and this is kind of considered a hallway. So I want to put a receptacle right here down low. And that's going to be on 12 with the dining.
Okay, so whether that's considered a hallway or not is going to be something that you're going to have to look at local jurisdiction written. But again, hallways are defined terms, right? So if that space is not 10 feet or more, then it wouldn't require the receptacle. Now, he's determined that as a hallway. He wants to add one. He didn't say the length of it, and that's fine. You can obviously add them anywhere you want. That type of thing. Now, over in the chat, Marcus, he said, never mind, but those out there might be still wondering because I did give you a lot there in that small segment. The base is the base at the bottom of the cabinet, whether it's a cabinet and usually it comes down and has a little toe kick on it. The base is the portion that's down, it's in contact with the base or the floor. Okay, that's called the base. So the overhang is the cabinet, the mount that hangs over the counter. You measure it from the base out to the edge of the overhang, and if that is more than 6 inches, then a receptacle can't go underneath that. At least the one that serves the countertop can't. That's nothing to say that the wall receptacle ones for the dining room can't go down below there, because that's fine. They're not serving the countertop. We're only talking about the ones that serve the countertop can't be under an overhang more than 6 inches beyond the base of the cabinet or the countertop. You with me? Okay. Anyway, you get it. So, well, Robbie, give me a code reference that says that, because again, you might be able to, if your loads, your calculated loads are not going to exceed, because you have what's called fixed appliances and not. So I would encourage you while you're watching to go look at 210 let's see here. I think it's 21, but let's go look at it. No, 210.23, and you'll look at A1 and A2. So you may or may not be able to get away with that depending on what the ratings are or what you're dealing with. Okay. But typically, a lot of times a dishwasher or something like that will say it requires a dedicated circuit. So then that kind of brings that into it. Now, you could run a multi-wire branch circuit there, and theoretically you have two separate branch circuits. Yeah, but you have to look at your load, whether or not you can have a dishwasher disposal on one circuit or not. And typically, usually because of the loads, that might be a problem based on that. But go check out 210.23 A1 and A2. Again, depending on whether or not you have a fastened in place, which a disposal would be, a dishwasher would be. And so you have to look at those rules there. All right, let's get back to his video. If I can figure out how to get back to it. Okay, sorry about that.
Same thing with this area. All right, right here we have our under move. It's showing me that door swings this way. I'm gonna stay off of these two touches, put the switch right here.
I will tell you, one thing that can come back to haunt you is indeed make sure that you're very aware of door swings. That would literally suck if you put something in and you're not paying attention to the way the door swings. That would be something that would really, you don't want that to be a surprise on you, right? So you want to make sure that you're fully aware of which way the door swings so you know where to put your switches and things like that. Another question that people ask me, they say, receptacles behind a door that swings, they say, well, they're not accessible. That you don't worry about that. You're still going to measure from the edge of the doorway measure. If it falls behind the door, that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to tell you something. Since you're allowed to go up to 6 feet from that break in the floor line, why are you putting one behind the door? But, you know, you can go just past the door. If the door is 36 inches, 32 inches, whatever, just put it just past the door if you're concerned about that. But it's certainly not against code to place it behind the door. Again, just because the door can be open, okay? Now, the reason I tell people that that's okay, that probably is the preferred place to put one, is because the furniture usually blocks all the other ones. That one, you know, that's going to be available for plug-in something like a stick up or a night light or an extension cord for a vacuum cleaner or something like that, right? Okay. But, so R. Kelly says, does the door break the plane of the measurement? Yes. So every door opening breaks your measurement. You're going to measure from the door, the break in the door. Okay. So if I have a door in the middle of a wall, I'm going to start at the right side of the door and I'm going to measure up to 6 feet and have a receptacle. And then I can go 12 feet from there. Same on the other side. I go up to 6 feet and put that receptacle. Okay. The layout beyond that, you could put it at 3 feet from the door if you want. You could put it at 2 feet from the door if you want, but you can't exceed 6 feet from the break in the floor line. In this case, a door opening. Okay. So that's kind of how you do your measurements.
See, the washer's going on the left and the dryer's going on the right. So that's going to be the washer. This is the dryer. You can put the dryer at 33 inches down low. It's not calling for other receptacle in this room, so we're good with that.
I will tell you, just so you know, if you're in that laundry room, that sounds like he's in a laundry room. If you wanted to put another receptacle in there, you could, and it can be supplied from that 20 amp branch circuit that's for the laundry. Okay. So that's perfectly okay to have that in there. Of course, we're not getting in this episode yet. He's got about 6 or 7 of these videos that we're going to review. But as you get further in, you'll notice that, again, all receptacles in a laundry have to be GFCI protected 210.8. So you'll follow that and all that. So, and for the 2020 code, that dryer 30 amps that's in that laundry room also will be GFCI protected. Okay. So really he's just doing the layout right now. So we're not getting into those type of details, but we will as we move through his layout as further on in successive videos. Hopefully you're enjoying this review. So let's go on and get into the next one.
And then for some reason, they want these switches on the wall. I have no idea why, but they want these switches. One for the fam light and fam fan. And then for the
Now, the reason that they probably wanted, he says he doesn't know why, but it's probably due to transition. So obviously a lot of people like to go from one room into the other room and they don't want to have to go all the way back to cut something off. So this might be a midway point and he's controlling it. If I take a quick glance at his drawing that's in his hand, it looks like to me, if you see the portion, it looks like a wishbone right in the middle of the drawing. I don't know if you could see that, but this is actually controlled at multiple locations. So he's got switches, but it looks like these are probably will be 3-way switches from based on his drawings. So he hasn't really noted that. So all I'm saying is it benefits you when you're doing your layout to make sure you mark it if it's a 3-way. It's just going to help you when you're pulling cable that you're going to know that you need a 14.3 from point A to point B and things like that. He might know, but again, as much detail as you can put on the stud since you're already there, feel free to mark those studs up. It's going to be covered anyway. Okay. So go for it.
All right, coming into the living room, family room. This is the living room right here. So we got to get a receptacle within 6 foot of this entry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's still within 6 foot of this door. So that is the receptacle for this whole wall right here. In this.
Okay, so he's doing his normal receptacle placements, 6 foot, 12 foot rule. That's normal. But we do have a question from some of the viewers. It says, question says, if a pantry is off the kitchen, can it still be run on the kitchen circuit? Or since the kitchen needs to be on a dedicated circuit, would it need to be on its own circuit or from another room? Okay, so if you look in the code, if you've got your code books, you look at the code, and we're talking about the layout of the branch circuit and what can be on this branch circuit, right? So if you're looking at 210.11, and we're going to be looking at the small appliance branch circuit, and that's 210.11C1, right? And in the future episodes, I'm going to be adding a third camera so that I can have camera down on the code book rather than have to go to the screen. I want to have multiple cameras so that you can actually see the code book as I'm looking at it. So we got a lot of things in the works. So it says, in addition to the number of branch circuits required by other parts of this section, 2 or more small appliance branch circuits shall be provided for all receptacle outlets specified in 210.52b, right? So now go to 210.52b. If you have your code book with you. Now, if you go to 210.52b, here's what it says. In the kitchen, pantry, breakfast room, dining rooms, or similar areas of a dwelling unit, the 2 or more 20 amp small appliance branch circuits required by 210.11C1, which we just read a minute ago, shall serve all wall and floor receptacle outlets covered by 210.52a. Okay, so as you get into the pantry, those wall receptacles are going to be served by one of the small appliance branch circuit. Now, some people say, well, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to add a third 20 amp circuit just for the pantry. Okay, that's perfectly fine as well. It does not have to be on those 2. That's why I said 2 or more. So maybe you're adding a third small appliance branch circuit, and that's going to serve your pantry. Just remember, if you add another one and you do a load calculation, you need to take that additional small appliance branch circuit into consideration. That's another 1500 VA. So make sure you add that into your calc. But other than that, you can add another one if you want. Now, most people, since a pantry is not really pulling anything, there's not going to be anything significant in there, they'll just come off of one of the receptacles that are serving the kitchen, the countertops and the wall around the wall. They'll just pop out of that small appliance branch circuit and pick up those receptacles inside of the pantry. Perfectly fine. Code tells us to do that. So no harm, no foul with that. So everything's still good to go. So hopefully I answered that question for you from the individual that was in the chat. Okay, let's get back to the video.
It's asking for a fan light. And this is going to be 3-way to over there to where we have those switches.
See, there's that 3-way he was talking about. You should have marked the other one 3-way as well.
You'll be able to follow along while I'm going around this house. Alright, so in this mailer room, we got this little thing right here. So we got to come off this door. We got to have a receptacle within 6 foot of this door. But it's not going to match up where I need that TV. So I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to go put a TV on the wall and the receptacle I need for that, but there's another receptacle over here somewhere. I'm gonna put it over here just because I think it'll look best.
Okay, there are plenty of people that say don't put it in that little cutout that he was showing. It's not usable. Well, sure, it's usable. Now, personally, I wouldn't have done that. Personally, since I know the receptacle TV, if you're putting a receptacle in, the cord's going to be 6 feet. I would have come just around the corner, scabbed it off a little bit. So I would have made 2 receptacles on that wall look a little better on that wall. But that was me. Rather than have one in that little corner space, that's just me because I think getting it out into the room is a better layout. That's his choice, but and it's all code compliant. I like the fact that he knew that one receptacle was going to be more than 6 feet, and he needed one for a specific layout on the drawing, but he added another one. And that's great. And he did that because it makes sense. But I would have moved that receptacle away from around the corner. Just personal preference, of course.
All right, so we got the one within 6 foot. This is within 12 foot easily. So now I'm going to measure and I'm going to try to get away with as little as possible. 1, 2. So I had a receptacle here, down low. Try to, I can see 12 foot. I'm just going to add one right here.
Now, clearly, he doesn't like to put receptacles under windows. and a lot of people don't. So he made the choice to cut short the 12-foot span and put one in the middle span and then measure them there to get to the other side of the wall. And that's perfectly preference. You're more than happy to do that. Just remember the 6-foot, 12-foot spacing rules. And some people have no problem at all putting them underneath the windows. A lot of the high-end homes that I did, actually, they wanted an extra receptacle that was switched under the windows because they were going to put Christmas tree lighting in the windows, and they wanted to be able to control Christmas tree lighting and all that specifically under the windows. So again, that was just an extra switched receptacle that we would add for them in order to be able to accommodate that. Again, this is a spec house, so obviously they're not going to go into that kind of detail. I can guarantee you that, but his layout's great. He's accommodating it, and he's probably adding a couple that aren't in the drawing because of his layout, and that's perfectly okay. He could have done the bare minimums, but he's working it out.
And one right here. And this receptacle right here is within 6 foot of this door. I don't want to put one facing this room because I don't want to add another 12 on this dining room receptacle. So that's 2 foot. Oh. Also got some switches going.
So let me tell you why he's doing that. If he were to go around that corner and put that receptacle right there on that wall in front of him, that is now facing, and it's kind of in the dining room. So then it would have to be a part of that 20 amp small appliance. By him running that other one, and it's a different room, like a living room, he's going to stay just shy of that. You got to remember that on a drawing or when you're walking the house, you're going to have lines of demarcation that are just going to have to be there. In other words, you're going to have to know when you cross from a living room into a dining room, or when you cross from a dining room into a pantry, or when you cross into a hallway. You're going to have to do your best to lay these out. Some of these residential drawings are very weak. In fact, some of them you just walk around with a customer. I guarantee you that Jay probably just takes a blank sheet of a basement layout and walks around and just draws in receptacles where they want it. So again, your drawing might not be extremely detailed, but what he did was he stopped just short of going past that line of demarcation, so that where he was technically in the dining room, because he didn't want to put another receptacle there. And there's really nothing that needs to be there in a dining room. You're not going to put anything on that wall right there. It's too small, too short. So he chose to stop his 15 amp branch circuit just shy. And that was a choice that he made. Probably a smart choice. I wouldn't have wrapped it around the corner either. Just creates additional unnecessary problems to deal with.
They gave me additional plans because the ports.
Last year I did over 1,300 service calls, all at the push of a button on a tablet.
Service Titan Payments easily allows our technicians in the field to obtain payment from the customer.
Take credit card payments.
Of course, we have commercials and we have to let them run. We can't do anything about them. We can skip them. So keep that in mind.
And this is going to be for the porch and light. I guess we have a weatherproof going on this porch. It's going to ride on this side of the wall. We got a weatherproof TV. It's going outside. Coming in.
I should probably add, there is really not the weatherproof for that. Those are weather resistant receptacles he's going to be installing outside. And of course, they're going to be GFCI protected. Again, all the rules 210.8A, outside receptacles. But again, he's marked it there because he needs to know where he runs that feed or however he loops those branch circuits, that he can poke it out right there. And a lot of electricians won't just poke it out and leave it because they don't want the NMB to be poked out and get wet. So what they'll do is they'll actually cut in the box, face it out, and that way they can get their cable in it, get the wire stripped and everything, and then they'll put some tape or something over the box outside so that it doesn't get moisture in it and things like that. Everybody's a little different, but again, if you happen to poke out your NMB, I'm going to give you a little tip because it does wick up moisture and can cause a failure there. Make sure if you stick out the NMB, make sure you tape up the end of it so no moisture can get in the end and wick up in the paper. The sheathing itself, it's not rated for a wet location, but during the testing, we do a 24-hour test on that sheathing. So that's why you hear the thing in the code about buildings that are open, can rain get on NMB. As long as it doesn't get into the end, it can handle temporary exposure to dampness or wetness, as long as the location ultimately is a dry location, that type of thing. So if you were to stick some NMB out there into that box or whatever, make sure you either seal the end of the NMB, or if you're going to strip it, make sure you curl the wires up into the box. These are the ones that are facing outside in a box that's exterior box. Then make sure you put something over that box so you don't get water in the box and things like that. Just little things to think about. You never know when you run on an inspector who will give you a bunch of grief over a piece of NMB that was exposed to moisture outside and things like that. Just better to be safe than sorry. That's all I got to say. It only takes a second.
All right, we got our switches coming in for our fan light. And I can see my TV's going there, so I'm going to add a receptacle right here because I don't want to stretch out the receptacle too far and it doesn't look good. So I got my receptacle there. Now I can wear, as long as I'm within 12 foot, I can go as far as I want. I forgot I got something going right here, so I'm going to have to move that around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here. Now I'm going to tape this around this side. So.
Okay, look, so what he's doing is not uncommon. Obviously, when you're laying out a room, he laid that one room out. Now he's laying another room out. Because of the placement that he wants to get his receptacles, it was in conflict with the receptacle placement in another room, right? So he's going to adjust his layout. So this is very common to be able to do that. Again, especially if your placement's going to be conflicting with another room. Typically, we see it all the time. So that's what he's doing. He's adjusting because he wants a layout in the room on the right, but it conflicts with a layout that he already placed on the room that he's in right now. So he's just kind of shifting things a little bit. Very common. We do it all the time. That's the thing about residential work. It's on the fly. When a commercial drawing, you put it where it says in the commercial. In residential, you got to get used to flow with it and move it a little bit and realize the layout, how things going to look, what's the end result, how the spacing of the receptacles, staying within code, but also aesthetics. Again, ultimately pleasing is what we want. Okay, so let's go.
Receptacle for my TV. Back in this room, I want to stay within 12 foot. I don't want to go into this window. I just don't like the extra drilling. So I'm just going to add a receptacle right here. And I'm going to see if I can make it to that wall where the bed's going to go.
Now, I will add, when he says the extra drilling, he's got to drill through those studs anyway. So it's really not a lot of extra drilling, but I will give you a tip. A lot of times what you can do here is if you didn't, and me and my brother used to do this an awful lot, and that is you don't necessarily always have to go around the wall. Sometimes at that left side before you got to the window, you could drill a hole down and you could go down, and depending on the way your floor joist is run, you might be able to go straight down, run it in that cavity and pop it right up on the other side or right up where the other receptacle is. So we used to do an awful lot of those layouts where we would drill down and drill back up. Again, depending on the way the studs. Now, what if your studs underneath your floor joists don't run parallel with the wire cable? Well, you still usually end up with less holes to drill down there than you do under this, because he's got, looks like some jack studs or whatever next to the window, like 4 or 5 studs and all that. He doesn't want to drill all that. And if you're somebody that's doing a lot of work with the cordless drill, going through a bunch of 4 studs, 3 studs can start to eat your battery. So believe it or not, I have done a room before like this, where all I have had to drill is 4 holes down underneath each box. And then when I'm downstairs, and of course I used to use a Milwaukee with an extension, and then it had an auger bit, 6-inch auger on the end. When I get down there, I just boom, 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 and hit those floor joists. Now, sometimes I got lucky that I had my cables were running parallel with the floor joists. And then beautiful thing, right? Just go straight down, go over and poke it up and done. You can do a room quick that way, right? So you can either go around the room or you can go down and down and under and back up. So again, that's the beautiful thing about residential is you get to look at all that. You get to choose which route best serves you. And as long as you follow the rules, protecting those conductors against damage in 300.4, then you're good to go, right? So that type of thing. So just keep that in mind. Now, Robbie brings a question. It says, when you're going down and up, they're talking about having to fire caulk, right? So most jurisdictions, you have to maintain the rating of that assembly. So when you're going horizontal, you do not. But let me tell you something, Robbie. I would much rather grab a can of the orange great stuff, which is the fire resistant foam, because I can go around, and after I drill all my holes, I can go around a can of that, and in less than 10 minutes, I can poke it and fill every little hole that I penetrate the top and bottom. And usually I get my helper to do it. And so, again, to me, it was a much more of a time saver dropping down and back up than it was to drill and pull through all those holes, that type of thing, you know? So to each his own, but again, there's different ways you can save a lot of time. But yes, if you penetrate that assembly, the top plate or bottom plate, you need to maintain the rating of that assembly. So in doing that, you will have to either use rock wool. Some jurisdictions will let you use insulation. I use the great stuff, the orange version that was fire resistive rating. That's what I would use, because I would buy it in these big cans with an applicator, and I just have my guy go around and boom, boom, boom. One quick pull in the hole seals everything up. And so, but I'm just giving you different ways to do it if you want to drill all those studs. And also, it can be problems sometimes in the corners because of how the studs are jacked in the corners, and you're trying to get that N and B around the corner. Well, if I can go down and over and straight up on the other side of the wall where that receptacle is, then I get rid of all that corner drilling and all that pulling and all the potential damage to the N and B. Again, there's many ways to do it. That's why I always love residential. People say residential is so much easier than commercial. I disagree, because once I became a commercial electrician, I learned how to bend raceways. I learned how to follow the drawings. Now, we're not talking about like controls and all that stuff. That's some pretty tough stuff. But just following orders, you got to be a little more creative as a residential. Not that one's any greater than the other, but again, there is some ability here in a residential. You got to think a little bit. And so, yeah, it's not just following a drawing, okay? So, how are you, everyone? Oh, you're saying, how is everyone? We're doing good, Lou. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you're enjoying the stream. All right. First time I've ever done one of these live. So let me know the feedback. Give us the likes, thumbs up. Hopefully you like it. All right. So let's go on and get back to this gentleman who so far I'm agreeing with. Now, I will remind you, there are quite a few videos that he's got that we're going to go through and give my insight. Some of them I don't like as much, but hey, that's why we're going to critique him. And so far, love what he's doing and love that he's sharing this with other people. Let's do it.
So it's asking for a building right here, usually one beside the bed. And now I'm going to stretch it out. This is with the 12 foot. Now I got to have another one right here, because this is a doorway, so I need one within 6 foot, and that's not going to make it over there, so I'm going to add another right here.
Again, he's looking at his layout. He knew where he wanted that other receptacle, so he gets it. He's got to put another one to stay compliant. So, love it.
Into the bathroom. All right, it's showing the counter is right here. So they're just gonna have to make this work. I think in these houses, these DR Horton houses, they have these smaller mirrors. So I think we have enough room to work with. They're asking for 3 switches. Like 2 vanities.
Now, hopefully he's going to scab that out,
And a back band.
because I don't think 2 studs is enough. Yep, he's going to scab it 1.
We're going to come over here, and we need our receptacle for our sink. And then we have...
Now, just give you some insight. So that receptacle that he's adding is the receptacle that's to be within 3 feet of the sink. That's a requirement in the code. And so by placing that receptacle there, it means that you can get to it for shaving, whatever, electric shave razor, whatever, but that's the requirement that it's there. So it has to be within 3 feet of the sink, okay? Now, people ask me this question all the time. What if it's a large vanity and I have 2 sinks? Can one receptacle serve the rule within 3 feet of the sink? And the answer to that is yes, if it's in the middle and it is truly within 3 feet of each sink. If it's not, and you put one on the left side like he did, but then you had a second vanity and that was more than 3 feet from the top inside edge, then what ends up being is you'd have to add another one on the right. And so again, you can get away with one. It might be in the middle, or you have one on the left if you only have one sink or whatever. So you just need to remember that rule. So those that do have your code book, okay, so that you say, well, which rule is that? So that I can make sure I follow my rules, and that way you don't get screwed, is 310.52D. And you'll see it says at least one receptacle outlet shall be installed in bathrooms within 3 feet of the outside edge. I think I said top inside edge. That's for the GFCI requirement. The outside edge of each basin. So you measure from the outside edge, you can go up to 3 feet. Okay. You only need one, even if you have multiple basins, as long as that one is within 3 feet of the outside edge of both of those basins or sinks. Okay. So again, these homes are typically small spec homes. So I think they're Horton homes. So there's just one receptacle. It's going to be within 3 feet of the sink. So that's all he needed to install.
All right, we have a water closet right here where the center is, saying that the door swings open like this, so they want the switches right here. And remember, like, you want to try to keep your switches within 36 inches of a door. So this is way less than 20.
Okay, so that is not a code rule, but it might be something that he's used to doing as a rule of thumb, keeping it within 36 inches of the door. It's really nowhere in the code is written for that, especially in a water closet like that, which is basically toilet room. That's just his practice. So don't by any means think that if you put switches for lighting, which is probably a light in an exhaust fan, don't think that you have to put it 36 inches away, or it can be just in the room. Doesn't have to be 36 inches away. That's just his choice to lay it out.
I mean, usually you want to go way less than that, but all right, we have one here. We got one light, one switch. We're gonna plug that. 3 in the door, 2 in the corner, and 2 in the house. So, all right. So that's all for inside the house, except for this weatherproof. I forgot. So it's calling for a weatherproof receptacle right here, so I'll plug that. And let's do the garage. All right, so we're in the garage now. We got one switch for one fluorescent. That's 1 times light. And it's asking for, usually you want to have a receptacle for as many cars as you can fit in a garage. It's a 2-car garage, so you're going to need 2 receptacles, one on each side of the wall.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So what he's talking about is the requirement. Now, he says on each side of the wall. Now, in his case, if it's a 2-car garage, that works out. But you got to remember that you have to have, if it's a 3-car garage, then I'd have to have a receptacle for each vehicle bay, okay? Because he does have a garage. So in this case, a 2-car garage, you put one on this wall and one on the opposite wall, then you're good, you're covered. But I want you to remember that. If it was a 3-car garage, then I could have one on the one wall that he's at, one on the opposite wall for that bay, and then the bay that's in the middle, I would have to have one on the back wall serving that bay. Basically, the footprint of each bay, you have to have a receptacle serving that. So again, where do you get that? 210.52, and you're going to follow over to G, And you're going to see the requirements here, and it says G1. It says in each attached garage, and that's what he's got, and in each detached garage, if it has power, at least one receptacle outlet shall be installed for each vehicle bay, okay, and not more than 5.5 feet above the floor. So these receptacles that are required to meet this rule cannot be higher than 5.5 feet. Okay, so just remember that. So however you install them, they cannot be higher than 5.5 feet to serve this rule. Okay, just keep that in mind. Obviously, he's okay because he's going to put one on that wall and he's going to put one on the opposite wall. Okay.
One here, and that's going to be up high too, just the same as the switches are going to be 48 to the top of the block. And then
as long as he's not higher than 5.5 feet, he's good.
See, I'm looking up and looking at all these panels where my panel's going to be. I'm just trying to figure out. So I'll put another receptacle there. This is a tankless water heater for gas, so it also needs a pilot light. So the only power we need is just a regular receptacle off the GFI in the garage. So once again, everything in the garage is up high, 48 to the top of the box. All right, with the panel.
And remember, that's your choice. That's his choice. As long as you don't go higher than 5.5 feet, the ones that are serving the vehicle bay. Now, any other receptacle that you want to add to a garage doesn't have to be 20 amp. It can be 15 or 20 amp, and it can be specific. Like if he had a specific circuit for a central vac or something like that. So the code meets, I have to have a 20 amp brand circuit for the garage. Once I do that, I can now have additional branch circuits in there. They don't necessarily have to be 20 amp. They could be 15 amp. They're for a specific need. But you got to meet the initial rule, and that is at least one 20 amp branch circuit to serve those receptacles for those vehicle bays that we've been talking about, okay? What that also means is we're not going to be serving what? The receptacles that are in the ceiling. That would be an additional circuit, okay? We'll talk about that when we get a little more into that. So let's do a little bit more.
Depending on what you want to do is you want to find a bay that is 14.5 inches at least. And trust me, you want to measure it because if you mess up, you go too far and try to squeeze that panel in there, you're going to catch hell. So this looks like the cleanest area. I don't want to get too far down. You know what? I'm going to put it right here if I can. 14.5. The width of a panel is actually 14 3/8, but you want to keep it 14.5. Just keep it comfortable and big. So we're going to put our panel here.
I will bring up something again since we're in that garage. If you've got your code book, go check out 210.11C4. That is for that brand circuit that is in that garage. Here's what it says. I just want to bring that. So again, we teach a lot of things here. It says, in addition to the number of brand circuits that are required by other parts of this section, and what other parts would that be? Well, that's section 11. And we're talking about laundry, small appliances, bathroom, that type of thing. It says, in addition to those, okay, at least 120 volt, 20 amp brand circuit shall be installed to supply the receptacle outlets required by 210.52 G1. So that 20 amp brand circuit that's being run to this garage for those receptacles that are not more than 5.5 feet high that serves each one of those vehicle bays, nothing else can be on that. You cannot hit the receptacles in the ceiling on that. Remember, we're doing the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code in my review. He might be in a different cycle, but just remember that. It also goes on to tell you that it says the circuit shall have no other outlets. So that circuit that's being run for those receptacles that are serving each vehicle bay cannot have other outlets like lighting outlets on that circuit. You're going to have a separate branch circuit for lighting in there anyway, but the circuit that you're running, this 20 amp, at least one, cannot supply any other outlets. Now, with that exception, it says the circuit shall be permitted to supply readily accessible outdoor receptacle outlets. So let's just say that on the other side of that wall of that garage, he has an air conditioning unit. And you have to have a receptacle in accordance with 210.63 within 25 feet as a service receptacle. So if it's readily accessible, it's outside, then he could come off of that circuit and feed that receptacle, and that would be okay. That is in the exception. And it only applies to that exception. Can't feed anything else but that exception. So he could pick up a receptacle that's outside, for example, and put it on that 20 amp circuit, right? But again, remember, if you want to run other brand circuits in there, other 15 amp ones, you're going to have to run another one to do the garage door openers. That is all permitted. You're only required to have at least one 20 amp. Okay, you can have more than that, or you could have 15 amperes in their circuits or whatever. Okay, there was a misconception that all the circuits in a garage had to be 20 amp. That's not true. Okay, so just wanted to make sure you understood that. Also, typical panel is designed to go at 14 1/4 right between the spacing of the studs, which are 16-inch on center. If your spacing is wider or whatnot, you may have to shim to get you where you need to be so that you mount your panel properly and all those type of things. So that's just what he's looking at right now, and that's what he's kind of laying out. And it's also important to look at how you're going to be routing your home runs to this panel. And that's the kind of things that he's thinking about right now. Other things to remember is you don't want to install the actual main breaker of the panel higher than 6'7". We don't want to do that. The center point of it, highest breaker, you don't want to exceed that. So there's different things that we'll talk about as you get into those videos where he puts the panel in and all those kind of stuff. If you're wondering where all that is and you're thinking, well, Paul, where am I getting all that? And you're like into all that by now, then you go to 408. 408's dealing with panel boards and switchboards and switchgear, but you want to go specifically to, hold on, let me get it open so I can be with you. We'll go to panel boards and we're going to look at, go down and let's see here. Oh, one of the things is also the orientation. Okay, we don't want any face-up orientation, those type of things. And the overcurrent device, actually, you know what? I think that's more or less located. Let's see here. I think that's in basically 240, but I wanted to see if it was in here in addition, in case somebody's like, well, where's the additional areas that I can get all that? So I want to look and see if there's any additional requirement for that, just while we're here, while we're looking. And I don't see it here. So where are we going to go to do that? Obviously, we're going to go 240 because we're talking about an overcurrent protected device. So let's do that. If you got your code book, go to 240. And we're going to be looking at location. And if we look at the location, let's see here. Let's see here. Circuit breakers, and we're going to circuit breaker because obviously just say that's what we're dealing with. Let's say it's a circuit breaker, and we're going to go to that and look at it. And the application and orientation of it is not to be higher than 6'7" to the center point of the breaker. Okay, so let's see here. Also, orientation of the circuit breaker on in the up position. So again, that's going to dictate how he installs that. And what else do we want? I'm just trying to give you everything that I can think about for this while we're in this area. Let's see here. What else? Let's see. Anything else I want to give? Can't think of anything else I want to give. I like to think of whether or not I can give you extra little tidbits of anything, and I don't know. So the only thing for you to remember that since it is an overcurrent protected device, you do have to meet the requirements of 240.24a. And again, that's where it ends up telling you it can't be higher than 6'7" above the floor working. But he'll probably cover all that and talk about it. But I just figured there's ways to look at it. So 408, it's not going to help you. 240.24a, that's going to be the 6'7". Also, if it's used as a switch, then you've also got those rules in. Obviously, it will be a switch. Then you could go look at the rules in 404 as well. And so I'll just go look at 404 and see if we have any rules for locations there. And we do under 404.8a. So it says for switches and circuit breakers used as switches. Circuit breaker is a switch. And you'll see that it has a height limitation there of 6'7" as well above the floor. So just different areas you can go to. Just make sure you remember how you install that panel, and your highest breaker is not more than 6'7" to the center point of the switch. Okay. All right, let's go on.
I usually do 44 to the bottom of that panel. And AC is not ran in here, but I've done these houses enough. Not this model. That's the first time I've done this model. But I can see the up here for the unit, for the air handler, and I'm almost positive that they're gonna run that line set right down here. So I'm pretty sure that I can take a bet. And you need a weatherproof receptacle within, what is it, 27 feet of a unit outside. So I'll put my weatherproof right here near it. And I usually don't put that too far down. I usually put it right here, just to be safe. That's it.
All right, so let's kind of come back to me. So again, great information, covers a lot of detail in there. Again, we gave you some tips here and there. So again, we were talking disconnect, and what I wanted to show you, there's multiple places. So if it's a switch, 404, it's an overcurrent device, 240. I went and looked and see if there was anything in 408. No, because that's just panel boards. So there's many ways you can look, navigate through the code. Now, you know, I said 6.7 off the beginning because I just knew what it was, but that's why you use the code, whip back and forth. And that's why you have your code book. And so that's kind of a sample of what we're going to do in these series. And this was just video 1. There's going to be, look for a live stream when we do video 2. And hopefully the Basement King will be with me for video 2. And we'll be able to pause and look things up in the code and give you some insight and add extra things. And hopefully you get something out of it and you enjoy it. Okay. So till next time, folks, I appreciate you. And hopefully you got something out of tonight's episode. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. You've been listening to Electrify with your hosts Paul Abernathy and Jay, the Basement King Grunberg.